Okay, and I'll pull up my notes. So, um, just a quick lesson plan for today, and then we'll see where we go from there. Um, but I wanted to talk a little bit about website design. I've been kind of doing a little bit of a deep dive into the more design part of web stuff, which you don't necessarily learn just through coding. And it depends on what you're interested in. If you're trying to be a full stack developer, it's probably a good thing to know a little bit about web design, just so you can get by. But you don't need to know a ton unless you want to be like a front end developer. I mean, it all just depends on, what you're interested in and what you're going after. And for me, I like web design. I like just design stuff in general. And so I figure I'll share some of what I've been learning recently. And I'm definitely not an expert. I've just been learning this stuff on my own through like YouTube and my own projects and articles and stuff. Um, so I'll start with some, and then I'll get into like some actual CSS, and maybe I'll walk through like uh, creating like a good foundation for a website using CSS. So this is just kind of overarching design ideas. I have some resources for learning design stuff. Um, so the first is I learned a ton about web design from this course. So this is a course, and I'll put some notes. Maybe since this is going to be important all along, and these notes aren't even finished, but I'll start by just putting these notes here, um, as a comment on my roll call post on Slack. I'll just put these notes here. Uh, Notes. There we go. So you can follow along. Um, okay, so this course is an awesome course on web design. This guy pretty much covers what I think is the most important things in web design, and kind of doesn't take up all of your time. There are definitely going to be courses out there that might take, 15 hours to go through, and you can probably go through this course in uh, you know, maybe 2 hours or three or so. And he has like exercises for you to do and stuff. You learn about, um, let's see. So type, or actually, the first interesting one is history. So he talks about kind of the history of modern web design and how it's kind of developed over the years. And you'll kind of get to see some like design trends. Um, and it's important to know that kind of stuff so am I designing a website that is, that looks like modern? Because there's a lot of things that you might not notice that go into like making something look modern. But it definitely affects, kind of the end user. If someone's on your website, if they get the overall sense that it's like dated, then it just doesn't look as good to them. And if you're like talking about a portfolio, or you're trying to sell something on your site or whatever, um, it's important to have it look like up to date, according to modern design trends. Type, so he talks about fonts, and that's a big thing. Different fonts and font sizes and kind of the different things that they can convey. Images, um, layouts, color theory, hierarchies, a bunch of other cool stuff. So that's an awesome course. I would definitely recommend checking it out. Kevin Powell is also a great resource. And I think he has some like Scrimba videos that you may have watched during the CSS section. He's very good at CSS, and so I really like his videos. Flexbox Froggy. I've mentioned this before, but it's a really fun game on learning Flexbox. Oh, spoilers, that's the last level right there. So you type in, they'll have like a Flexbox and then a property, and you have to decide what value of that property is going to make the frog move to its lily pad. So you can see justify content flex end is how I'm moving this frog to the end there. If I were to say like center, then the frog is in the center. And it's actually a flex box. So if I were to like resize this page, oh wait, okay, that doesn't behave exactly how I thought. But the point is you're learning how flex boxes work and justify content, align items, um, kind of some of the most important properties regarding flex boxes. And it's fun making these frogs go to their lily pads that they need to go to. And my last thing about learning this stuff is if you like CSS, you'll naturally get better at it as you make more projects. Um, that's just how it goes. If you like doing something, you're going to do it. If you don't love CSS, then you're probably not going to learn a ton of it, and that's fine. Um, okay, so resources for design inspiration. So I think an important thing about making a website look good is having kind of the right end goal in mind, knowing what you're going for, and so having inspiration. So kind of the most basic thing you can do is make a mood board to inspire you and solidify your design ideas. So a mood board could be you're going onto different websites that you like and taking like screenshots. So here, and I'll start to get to these later, but this is a website that I found randomly. It's this person's portfolio, Sean. And
Um, Sorry to interrupt. I've been
yeah.
following via Slack, but did you want to share your screen too?
Oh no, I didn't. I totally thought I was sharing my screen this whole time. I'm sorry, y'all. Okay. I always check, and the one time I didn't. I'm sorry. Okay. This is going to be a lot better now that I'm sharing my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So, okay. So, uh, let's see. I talked about this course here at the start. Web design. This is an awesome course. And talks about pretty much all the basics you'll need to know about making a website look good. He doesn't talk about coding at all. He's not even really like a programmer. He's more of a designer, and he uses a tool called Webflow, which Webflow is like it's a way to make a website without coding. Um, and there's other websites that you can use to do this type of thing, like Squarespace or Wix or WordPress, and they have like a little editor. This is kind of like a graphic here that they're showcasing it, but there's like an editor and you do all this, like you skip all the CSS and just click and drag to make components. It's a cool way to design sites. I have kind of tried it for like 5 minutes. Um, so he uses that and he uses a tool called Figma. So this is Figma. It's free and it's pretty much the main tool that everyone uses for like web design. So if you're like a UI designer, UI or UX, um, you're going to be using Figma mostly, probably. And so this is like an example of this is a portfolio that I've been designing for myself. And what's nice is um, you could think of it kind of like Adobe Illustrator or, um, you know, something like that, where it's just like a design tool that you could get to like click and drag, like I can make a square. Um, but the square is going to appear in the center of the page. It's going to have some specific uh, qualities about it. That's because I have this component here in an actual Flexbox. And so you can like, it's like a design tool that is like built for the web or built for like, uh, user interface. So there's a lot of like helpful things like you can have Flexboxes built in, and you can even have like a CSS overview of everything, and uh, it's pretty useful. It makes it faster to do designs and then port it over to your CSS and not have to create the entire design in your CSS. You get to do most of the fiddling around with your design in an actual tool where you can click and drag. Um, so anyways, yeah, that's this course. He does web design stuff and he's great. Kevin Powell is another person who I think there was some Scrimba videos that he taught that were part of the Code the Dream curriculum. So he's really good at CSS and has awesome videos, so you can check that out. Flexbox Froggy is a way to learn Flexbox. I've mentioned it before, but here's just one example. So they want us to use justify content to make all these frogs go onto their respective lily pads. And so here I would do justify content, and then I'd have to figure out which property of justify content out of these is going to give me um, the thing that I want. So it's going to space the frogs where I want them. And I'm guessing space between is probably what I want because, and you'll start to learn this, that's what this tool is for, is learning justify content, align items, the different values of those and how they space different elements on the page. So justify content space between will um, space out all the frogs where the space in between each frog is as big as it can get, which is, I know, is how you get the frogs onto those lily pads. So it's a fun way to learn Flexbox. Okay. If you like CSS, you'll naturally learn it and get better at it. If you don't, then you won't, and that's fine. You don't have to like CSS. You don't have to like front end stuff. I happen to like it, but there's uh, the world of coding is really big. And just because you're entering into like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript doesn't mean this is where you're going to stay. If you like, doing video game development, you can learn that. If you like doing, um, you know, I don't know, embedded systems, which would be like making an Apple Watch or a toaster or something, um, or medical devices. There's tons of different things you can code and or robotics, or data. And so I happen to be doing web design. That's kind of my journey, but um, you know, you might not care to learn more CSS after this, and that's totally fine. Um, so here's some resources for design inspiration if you're making a website and you want it to look good. Mood boards. So um, I have I've made mood boards in Figma. That's a good place to make them, or you can just drag them into like a Word doc or something. But basically go to websites and like this is a website I like. You can go and you can screenshot it, which on a Mac, you can hold Command Shift and then 4 to drag out an area to screenshot, or you can just Command Shift 5 to screenshot the whole screen. Or wait, this allows you to drag a selection to screenshot. I think Command Shift 3. Yeah, that does a screenshot of your whole screen. And on Windows, I know there's some sort of hotkey for screenshotting. You can look that up. But Yeah, finding websites you like and screenshotting them and then putting them into a mood board. It's a good way to start. Using other websites as a reference, and you can make a bookmark. So I have a bookmark tab here for example front end sites. And these are just a bunch of websites that I've found that I like the look of, and I just keep around. So um, if I want to see how something was done, I can reference it. And then there's sites built for design inspiration. One of the best ones is awards.com with three W's. Um, and this is like the best. Actually, I think I have it pulled up in another tab here, awards.com. So this is websites that are basically voted as the best by the community. So people vote, and you can vote um, on websites, and you can look at like some of the best. Like we could see this is, I think, the site of the day. Yeah. So we could click on it and take a look. They don't make it super obvious to get to the actual website itself. Um, let's see. There's a way to do it. Oh, it might be hidden. It's hidden behind this. Yeah. You have to click on visit site down here. And now we're on this website that apparently is good because it uh, people are voting, saying that it's really good. It's taking a minute to load. Okay. And a lot of them on this website are going to be like pretty unique. There's all sorts of different things, but pretty interesting, different. I wouldn't say it's the most easy to navigate website, but it's cool looking. Um, anyways, lots of cool websites on awards. Another one is Mobbin, which this it's O or Mobbin, and I think you have to make a web or an account, or you have to like sign in. But it has like different web components, and you can like um, sort. So you can look at like table and then see a bunch of examples of like different tables that people have made, um, or progress indicator. They kind of separate it out into a bunch of different types of components. Um, one of my favorite ones is dribble, and that's three B's. I don't know why. I guess there's some trend where you use a word with a bunch of the same letter. Awards, mobbin, and dribble. Um, Dribble is like kind of a hub for graphic designers in general, and um, there's tons of cool graphic design things. And here you can search. One of the trending searches is landing page, so that would be kind of the first page you get to when you get to a website. And you could see there's a bunch of like uh, cool ideas. Um, don't know why my internet's being kind of slow right now. Um, yeah, cool. Looks cool. And it's not an actual website, I don't think. A lot of these are just kind of a design. And then you can go to like the web design category and just get all sorts of different web design things. If you wanted to see how someone did like a contact section, search contact, and then optionally hit web design, which is just another filter. And then you'll see uh, different examples of people's contact sections. Um, okay, so awards, Dribble, and Mobbin. Good, good places to find um, inspiration. CSS frameworks are also a good place to find design inspiration, and they also help you understand kind of the basic components that build up websites. So there's actually kind of names for all the different things you'll find on websites, and you might not know all the different names, and it's interesting to like go to these sites and see um, what all the names for the different types of components are. Um, and so these are the two most popular CSS frameworks, Tailwind and Bootstrap. Um, and really quick, just if you haven't heard of a CSS framework, they basically, it's like um, some code that you import into your project and it makes something easier. That's just like a framework in general. Um, these ones are specific for CSS, so they make CSS easier. And some of them, like, they all do it in a slightly different way, and some of them totally abstract away the CSS. So you're only putting classes on your HTML elements, and you don't even do any CSS. Um, both of these work like that, Tailwind and Bootstrap. So you can basically skip writing CSS altogether. You still do need to know how it works to some degree, you should, but it can definitely make things faster and easier. Um, so here's the Tailwind website, and you can check it out. It's awesome. Here's just a part of it I thought was really cool. They have basically a couple different little like they have the same component built out with a few different themes, and you can click through the themes. So it's this component we're looking at, and then this is the simple theme selected. I could select playful, and it shows it in kind of a different way, playful, elegant, or brutalist. And so these are actually terms that you could search if you want like to find, um, you know, you might start to gravitate towards a certain design style, and it's good to know what terms kind of are associated with that. And so you could now look up, if you say you like this style, you could go brutalist web design, and then you can see what that looks like. So it's brutalist is super like bold in your face, like big gigantic font and lines, and it's kind of like messy. Um, yeah. Um, and I was mentioning these different CSS libraries, they have all these different like components. And so this would be like, there's like pages and components, and you can just check them out to get an idea of what's out there. So this would be like a sign-in page, um, stacked lists. And so this looks like it's actually like part of their website, but this is just like an example of something that you could build with their framework. This isn't like I can't actually click on these, they're not real people. This is just a sample. And there's this whole like nav bar. Like it's a pretty good looking nav bar, and you could go to their code and copy it and paste it into your project, and then you have this nav bar. And not only is it, a fast way to get some good looking code, but when you're following a framework like this, they likely are following some sort of kind of standards for making sure that the HTML is semantic and that it's accessible, and that, the colors and font choices are all good. They might be doing things that you wouldn't even have thought of, that are like good standards in web development. And so that's another good reason to use these is because um, they're experts at designing web components. And so yeah. And Bootstrap is another one. Tailwind and Bootstrap are very similar. Um, Bootstrap is more like you can style an entire button with just like one class. Like you would say like I think for this you would put a class, you'd make a button and then put a class on it that's button primary, and then all of a sudden you have this fully styled button. And it might come with a lot of like CSS behind the scenes to make it happen. Um, but it's only one class that makes, the whole kind of component. Whereas Tailwind is more like fine-grained. So it's generally like one CSS property per class in Tailwind. So if I were to look at some Tailwind code, you'll notice this is the problem with Tailwind is each of your classes becomes a long list of these different helper classes that each have a CSS style on them. So your class becomes really long. But it means you don't have to write any CSS in both of these frameworks. You don't have to touch CSS. You just write HTML and put classes on them. I could show you how to set these up in your project too, if you're interested, but let me know later. Okay, so I started with general design tips and then didn't get too far into it. But my first tip was creating a color palette for your website. It's good to pick a limited color palette. If you're just kind of willy-nilly with it, then your website might end up looking like chaotic or disjointed. Like you don't really have much of a consistent theme or identity. And that's something you generally want to avoid. You want to try to make it a consistent theme. So starting with a color theme is good. This website, coolers.com, it's like colors, but with two O's. It just has color palettes. And that's pretty much all the website is just color palettes, and they're good. They're really good color palettes. And so if you like one, you can copy colors from it, or you can like save it. You can have an account and make your own color palettes. And they have like some tools for checking contrast and uh let's see, you can open the palette and add to it, um, create your own. Yeah, it's good for colors. Um, and another note on colors, you want on a website, you want the text to be able to stand out against the background. So you generally want um, two colors that are part of your website that contrast a lot. So one can be your text and one can be your background. You can see like this tool I'm using is called Notion, and it's just like a note-taking tool I have. You can see it has like a dark gray background and a light gray, almost white text. Um, so that would be like, a way to get contrast. Another way would be light background, the typical way on most websites. You'll see a light background like white and then dark black text. And that's great. And if you want um, some like kind of identity, some, interest, some flair, some color, kind of use it as like an accent. So like this website has their logo and like buttons and stuff as their accent color, and that's pretty typical. And even a website like Facebook, you might think of Facebook as being like blue, but when you go to their website, and I guess I don't really want to go to my Facebook account right now. Let's go to Facebook and let's just go to images. So if you go and look at what actual Facebook looks like, it's not actually blue. The interface on their website is actually um, mostly neutral colors, and they just have like accents of blue. So that's pretty typical in web design. You'll make um, the like action buttons your kind of brand color. So your brand color might be like green or orange or whatever. And then your background is probably either it's like a neutral tone. So um, yeah, okay. That's I think I'll stop there and yeah, just check in. How's everyone feeling? Okay, a question from Simon a while back. Similar to WordPress? Yes. Webflow is similar to WordPress. Webflow, I don't know if you can make like backend stuff. With WordPress, you can make like a full-on backend, and that's with or without coding. Um, with Webflow, I'm pretty sure it's mostly just like a static website. Like you couldn't make like, you know, um, a place for people to like leave comments or posts or anything. I'm not sure though.
Oh, do you know if they host for you? Do they deploy, or do you have to pay
Um,
for that?
yeah, another good question. I bet they have like some partners that help you with deploying. Um, I've never I've never like built a site on here, but that's worth looking into for sure. Um, I would say if you really want to like build websites quick, like I've had a few friends hit me up to make websites, and I've kind of been like, well, I could code a website for you, but you know, I would
That's not
love
what they really need, and then they got to maintain it, right? So,
exactly. Yeah, so a big thing is I don't want to hand them a website that's all code and then they're like, you know, every week or two they're like, "Oh, I want to change that image," or "Oh, I want to add this or that." You know, I would love to be able to hand them something that was designed in something like this to where it's a little easier for them if they could like drag and drop and you know, they don't have to know any code to be able to work on their own website. So, um I've been a little hesitant to just code websites for people because I don't want to kind of lock them in to needing me anytime they want to make changes. Um, so I think it's worth looking into tools like this. I did some work on WordPress recently and I didn't like it very much, but it's probably just because I know how to do it with code and there's a whole other learning curve with, you know, one of these no code tools is what they're called, or like a CMS, another word for it, CMS, content management system.
can I ask how you learn Figma, or did you just mess around with it?
Yeah, so Figma is really easy to get started with. They have two different kind of modes, and you can just go to their website. You can go to their website and use it, like you can download their app, or you can just do it on their website. And it's free, so you can like I don't even pay for it, and I've done all this stuff. So um, they kind of have two different things you can make. You can do a fig jam or a design. And so a jam is like, um, I'll show you here. A jam is more like for like a mood board or something. And literally like it's so easy. Like anyone could go in and just make stuff. You have like a couple simple things. You could be like, oh, I want a square, square. Oh, I want to type something. Hello. It's very like user friendly. You know, if you have never used
Oh, you
Photoshop
could do a
or anything like
wireframe.
that. Yep. So it's really good for wireframes. There's actually a template for wireframes on here. Let's see. Um, and in general, the tool itself is basically, I don't know what I just clicked on. The tool Figma is pretty much
Uh,
designed for wireframes. That's like what it's made for. And so you can make things like
okay.
this. Um, and yeah, I learned Figma from I started it and we had to do wireframes, which is kind of like an initial mock-up of your project. Um, we had to do that for the coding school that I went to, but you can just pick it up pretty quick, Figma. And then this is the jam portion of it, which is pretty easy and you can do, most of what you'd want to do. But then if you want to get more like in depth with it, you can do a design file. And so a design file would be like an actual full-on design, and um, you can have components that are kind of like in a layout together. And you can even make interactions. So you could make it so like you can hover over a button and it'll bring you, or you can click on a button, it'll bring you to another page or something. Um, I don't really have any crazy examples, but um, and then there's like community made um, files on Figma that you can just go and check out. So like this is one that someone made that's a bunch of components and you can look at it and they just have components here. Colors and different buttons and button groups, icons. So you could build up a website using one of these kind of kits in here if you want. Um, anyways, yeah, Figma is great for just getting out the design without needing to
So it's like
do it
a
all in
project
CSS.
management. It's like
Um, project management. It's more like the designers like UI and UX, which UI, UX, user interface and user experience. Um, let's see. Human first design, approach to product design, human first approach to design the aesthetic experience. So UX and UI kind of go together, and it's like a field that a lot of people, there's a lot of jobs in, and it's very closely connected with coding, at least for like most coding projects. You're going to have, some front end that the user interacts with. And so the UX and UI team, they're designing everything. So as the programmer, it's likely you might not even be making the designs. Like you don't even pick the colors or the fonts or sometimes the spacing between elements is even like specified for you. So you have like a design file that's made and you copy it to a T with your code. But there's like a whole team of designers that are the UI and UX team. They're uh, kind of like going out, they're interviewing people who use the product, um, asking them how they feel about certain features, kind of gauging, the general vibe, and then making design decisions. Um, that's what that is. And so they use Figma and they'll send you a Figma file, and then you have to turn that Figma file into an actual website. That's just one way. That's, but it's a typical way that you might design a
that makes a
website.
lot of sense, actually. I can see how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely I would check out Figma if you want. It's helpful for getting better at understanding design stuff and just learning CSS is not necessarily going to teach you how to design stuff and make good designs. Um, but um, so that's where learning something like Figma, you can like change things quickly and drag things around. It's a lot more like user friendly than, having to go and actually change all your code. Um,
Is there
okay.
any way to get the code from that?
Yeah, so there's a mode called dev mode, which you have to have like the pro version, unfortunately, but if you have dev mode, you can like export it and everything that's like in here will it'll make the CSS and HTML for all of it. So you can pretty much just copy and paste this and it'll be a website. Um, There's going to be some little things you need to do, probably, but it's pretty fully featured. So if whoever's designing is like really doing a good job, they're making things into like layouts, like flex boxes and stuff in here. So like I made this hero section, and this hero section has what's called an auto layout. And an auto layout allows me to like change the spacing of everything as if it's in a flex box. And you can change the pad or the gap between different elements and, all sorts of things like that. And you can even make components. So like this thing I was looking at, this button thing, these are components. And so if I were to drag, if I were to go to assets, buttons, so there's one button that they made, and you can click on this button and change different properties of it, like the size. So over here, I have small, medium, and large. I can click large, and it'll swap it out with the larger version that they made. You can switch the color to secondary, primary, or tertiary. Icon, left, drop down. So you can make like components in Figma that are kind of like, um, you know, these are more in line with when you do React. React actually allows you to make like reusable components. And so these would pretty much directly correspond with a React component. Okay. How's everyone feeling? Is this helpful? Would you like me to do some CSS stuff, or is there anything else you want me to go over? I'm happy to do some CSS. We could also do stretch goals for the project or just whatever. Um, Actually, really quick, let's take a little break and I'll show you some cool websites that I've found. So I like this one. Um, I just found this one today. These are websites I found on that awards website. Um, and just to kind of get some inspiration, And this is a really crazy one. So there's some people that make websites using 3JS, which is basically a way of doing like graphics in JavaScript. So like video game graphics have their own set of like shaders, and it's like a whole part of programming. And there's something for that, or for JavaScript, called 3JS, which makes it easier to do like three-dimensional stuff in JavaScript. So this is someone's portfolio that he made in 3JS. And like these are his projects. Like, so it's sometimes fun to look up uh people's websites and just see kind of what's out there. Um, because yeah, people make some pretty cool stuff. This one, this one's pretty like kind of like techy and um corporate looking, but it's pretty cool. Um, yeah. Okay. How about we do some CSS? So I have this demo page that I've been working on for a bit, and maybe I could just take all the CSS off of it and show you like from the very start what I might do. So first of all, there's a couple things that I'm going to take out. I had like the beginnings of a mobile nav bar set up, and I'm gonna first thing that I'll do when I start doing design is put my page side by side with my code, because when you're writing code, it's annoying to have to jump back and forth. And so if you set up live server, which is an extension, live server, For some reason, my extensions aren't loading. My internet's been kind of weird today. Um, so set your website up side by side, and then you can write your code and see the results of it immediately, which is nice. Um, so I'm gonna delete a couple things here. I made like a mobile nav thing that I want to just get rid of right now because okay, cool. So this is an unstyled page, has most of the same things that you will have in your portfolio. And I'm just gonna start going through just oh, sorry. And just kind of giving you like just kind of talking through like what the design decisions I might make. So the first thing that I like to do in CSS is I like to do this star selector, which this is a selector for everything. So every tag is gonna be included in this selector. It says select everything, and then any styles we apply here are gonna affect all of our elements. And so I'll usually start with that and I'll say padding 0 and margin 0. So that basically is like a reset for all padding and all margins. And um, you'll see a lot of people do that. It's just a way of like, there's a lot of like the elements, HTML elements that make up your page are going to have a default style to them that just come default with like the HTML standard. And I would like to override some of those. Another thing that you might want to override is the links. So you can say text decoration none. That gets rid of the underlines on your links, which if you're going to get rid of the underlines, you still need to indicate to the user that it's um, a link somehow. You need to differentiate it from the rest of the text somehow. So we could just change the color. The color is blue right now. I'll leave that for now. That's fine. Um, let's see. Um, Another thing that I'll put in the star selector is box sizing border box. And that's kind of a weird property. What it does basically is if you put a height and a width on an element, border box, like having the box sizing be border box, makes it so that the height and width include the padding of the element. Otherwise, the padding is added on after the height and width is calculated. So this is just a little bit more intuitive for doing height and width, in my opinion. Um, so this is kind of our, let's say, CSS reset. That's what people will sometimes call it. And sometimes a CSS reset is going to include resetting the styles on a bunch of different elements. But that's good for now. Now what I'll do is on the root element, which the root element is basically just your HTML element. This is where I'll usually put CSS variables. And so that's something you might not have seen before. So I'm going to go to my body and I'm going to say I want a background color of, let's try aquamarine. Okay, so I have this background color. And what if I want to use this background color in multiple places in my code? And then I decide, oh, actually, I want to change this to be like a little bit lighter. Now I have to go back and change it everywhere if I want it to match. So if you have one color that appears many times in your code, it's nice if you don't have to just, if you can have it in one place and then you change it in that one place, and then all the other references to that color are just references to that original one. So the way you can do that is through CSS variables. And the way they look is like this. You can say dash dash and then the name of the variable. So I could say color background primary. And then I'm just going to copy this RGB value, paste that. And you can store anything in here, but the name here is what you decide. So I'm calling this color BG primary for background primary. And now when I want to refer to that, you can say var parentheses and then the name of the variable, color BG primary. And now this is referring to that. And so now if I had a bunch of different elements, like I want to get rid of this, but if I did like, let's say H1 color, and I wanted to do it that color, I could say var color BG primary. And now you can see my header disappeared because it's that same color. But I might want to do a primary, a BG primary, a BG secondary. I might want to do a font primary and a font secondary. And then I might want to do, let's say, accent primary and accent secondary. And these are all just like, every time I do it, I kind of get a different idea of what I want. Okay, so these, I'm just copying and pasting. I'm getting a couple kind of containers for the different colors that I'm going to include in my page. So the BG primary, BG secondary, let's say I'll have this be kind of like the background primary, but like a little bit darker. Font primary, and like I said, your fonts should be neutral colors for the most part, and then occasionally you can do like a little accent color. But I'll just do like a dark, almost black. And then the secondary, I'll do a little bit lighter. The accent, um, my background is already a little bit colorful. Well, actually, I'll follow the kind of idea that I was going off of earlier, where your background and your main text color are both pretty neutral. And then you have like an accent. So I'll make my background actually kind of like a white. Um, sure, let's go full white. And then the secondary is going to be just like an off-white. And I'm going to have to tinker with these once I like start adding elements and seeing like actually applying them in my page. For right now, they're just kind of like, it's hard to tell what they're actually going to look like, you know. Um, and then my color accent primary and accent secondary. Let's make these a little bit more like saturated. Sure. Okay. And then the H1, I'm going to make my color accent primary. So you can see it's right there now. And that does look a little bit too light against the background. And I can check my contrast by pulling up my dev tools and selecting this guy here, hovering over that. And you can see there's a little contrast showing up there and a little icon saying it's bad, the little exclamation point with the circle saying the contrast on this element is not very good against the background. It's not very readable, which means it's not very accessible. So I'm going to change that to a little darker. And you can see I'm changing it here and it's changing it down there too. So yeah, CSS variables are a great way of like kind of getting your all of your kind of main design decisions in variables in your root, and then just referring to them throughout your CSS. And you could also do this for like default font family. So I could say my default font family is going to be, and generally when you do a font family, you see like these different ideas showing up, and these are like one font and then other fallback fonts because someone's computer might not have the font that you tell it to have. Um, and so I usually don't try to I usually go based on one of these and then I'll maybe like add my own font, but I usually don't just put one font. Um, so let's do Arial. Um, and I'll have this be my default font family like that. And now on my body, I'll refer to var default font family. Okay, so that's CSS variables, which is great. And then when you're done doing all of your CSS, if you want to change your color of something, you just go here and you can change all of your colors. And that's pretty awesome. Um, okay, so another thing I would generally like to do is when you're so I took all the margin and padding off of everything by default, which looks bad. And a way to um, kind of amend that is you generally don't want things pressed up right to the side of the screen. And so I might do like padding on the body element. I might say like uh, 2 rem, or let's go like 1.5 rem. Um, Rem is another element. It's another unit for like you have pixels, you have percentages, and you have rem, R-E-M. And what that is it's like a multiple of your root font size. So the default font size is 16 pixels. And so this would be 1.5 times 16 pixels. One rem would be 16 pixels. And the reason why that's nice to change, or it's nice to space things using rem, is that if you wanted to say like do a media query, so if we could say media, uh, forgetting how to do a media query. It's one of those things when you don't do things very often, you definitely forget, but it's okay to just look things up. Um, okay, so I have this media query, and I don't have a selector here. So I'll say, um, oh wait, that was supposed to be the body element right there. Body. Okay, so let's say on a smaller screen, we want the root font size to be a little bit smaller. So I'll say root, and then I'll say font size is 14. Um, and this is a media query for, let's see, max width. So anything under 600 pixels width, this is going to be applied. So it's going to change the root font size, and then everything that is styled using a rem will be like adjusted based on the font size changing. So you can basically change, when you're using rem, you can change the font size in like a media query, and then it'll change the kind of spacing and sizing of all the elements that you use rem on, which is nice for doing responsiveness like media queries where you can change the font size and then you don't have these kind of mismatch uh, sizing between your font size and all the other elements. And so I could see what this looks like. Let's make it really dramatic. I'll put it down to like 10 so it gets really small. And then I'll move this down to 10 pixels or at 600 pixels. And one way to do that is you can click on this down here, which is the responsive mode. And so you can see the dimensions right here and move it. So I'm going to move down to 600. Okay. I didn't see any change. Looks like something's not changing in our font or in our media query. Just to make sure this media query is working, I'm gonna do body. This is just a check. Okay, so the media query is working. 600 changes to red. Um, oh, I didn't do a unit here. There we go. 10 pixels. So now when I'm over 600, it's really big. When I'm under 600, it's really small. That's not actually what you'd really want. It's not like the most practical, but you might want to do like 14 or something. Um, anyways, that's a subtle thing, but that's just explaining why I might use rem instead of pixels so that you can change the root font size in the media query, and then the size of everything else will adjust with that. And I'm just in the habit of using rem. Let's see. Another thing we'll want to do is take away these bullet points on unordered lists. That's another thing I like to do just by default. Um, so I'll actually bring this A tag selector down there. Now I'll say the way to get rid of those bullet points is UL list style type none. You can also do list style none. Um, that gets rid of the bullet points. Let's see, some chat messages. Oh, okay. People leaving. Is anyone still here? Am I just talking to myself? Oh, people are here. Okay. Hi, y'all. Okay. Um, let's see. We're at the hour and 10 minutes point, or around the hour point. So I'll go for a little bit longer and then, or wait, I need to check if I have any more sessions. Okay. No, we're good. Okay. Okay. I'll do a few more things. So I know I didn't get very far, but I feel like I have to explain all the CSS stuff that I do. Okay, so we're doing CSS variables for the color and the font family, which is awesome. We could also do it for font sizes and all sorts of other stuff, but I'll just move on past that for now. Um, so having a padding on the body is really great because uh, you definitely want your elements to not be pushed up directly to the side of the page ever. Um, and let's see, the next thing, maybe let's do some Flexbox, or actually let's change the color of these links. So the link color, it might make sense to use one of the accent colors as the link color. So I could say color accent primary or color accent secondary is the color of my A text. So I'm going to say color. And again, that's a variable, a CSS variable. So I'm going to say color accent. Let's try secondary. See how that looks. Looks pretty decent. I'll change this to be a little bit darker. And then I'll change it to like bold too. So font weight, and font weight can be 1 through 900, or it can be like a named value. So it's kind of two different ways of assigning the weight. Um, each of these numbers, the 1 through 900, is associated with one of these key names here. But it's easier to just remember these names. So let's do bold. The higher weights are more bold. So if I were to do like 900, that'd be like the most bold. But it depends on if your font actually um, includes all those different font weights. Okay, that looks all right. So now I'm going to want to do a flex box to get this BMO avatar here to be side by side with this, and then to get these nav links up there. So when you're doing Flexboxes, it's always important to look at your HTML. Just in general, when you're doing CSS, it's important to kind of refer back and know the structure of your HTML. So I'm looking at this. I have a header with this image, the BMO text, and all of these links, kind of the nav bar right here. And I'm going to want the whole, let's see. Okay, so I remember when I originally made this, so I have a header and a header container. And the header, the only like direct child element of the header is this header container. And the reason is because um, I want the header to have a certain color, but the contents of the header should be contained within this header container. So the background color of the header is it's gonna stretch all the way to the sides of my page, whereas the content of it is gonna be constrained by this header container. And if that didn't make any sense, I'll try to show you and you can see what I mean there. So I'm gonna say header, and it's gonna have a background color. And I can choose a variable. Let's do color BG secondary. And it could be a little more dramatic here. So I'll go over to this variable, pull that down, just so you can see it. And as you can see, there's padding on the body, which makes it so that the header is actually squished in here. And I don't want that. I want the header to extend all the way out. And so instead of doing a padding on the body, I think what I'm actually going to do is all the rest of these sections are within a section tag. So I'm just going to put the padding on the left and right, or just all sides of the section tab or tag. And then the body itself doesn't have any padding. And that allows the header to stretch, the background color of the header to stretch all the way to the sides of the page. So we got that. And now I want to make the header a flexbox. Except I don't actually need the header to be a flexbox. I need it to be this header container inside. The reason is because if just the header is a flexbox, it's only applying the flex to this header container inside. And then the header container itself, which has kind of the important elements that need to be spaced out, like the image, the name, and the nav links. This container itself wouldn't move those elements side to side like we want. So we need to put the flex box on the correct element, which would be the header container, which is the direct parents of the elements that we want spread. So I'll do a selector for header container, and then I'll say display flex. And that didn't seem to do anything. So just to verify that's working, let's set the background color to red, just to make sure that selector is working. It's not. Okay, so something's wrong with this selector here. It's not changing the color of this header container. And now I see the reason is because I used an ID, not a class name. So checked. To select for an ID, a class name is period. The hashtag is for an ID. And now I can delete that background color. Cool. So now we did a flex on this element and got at least the nav bar displaying side by side with the avatar. It still looks bad, but don't worry, we're gonna address that. So I'm gonna do display flex, and then I'm gonna say, I want these elements to be pushed away from each other as far apart as they can go. And so the way you do that, and if you play Flexbox Froggy, you'll get comfortable with all these. We're gonna do justify content space between. And that pushes these elements as far apart as they can be. And then I'll say align content or align items center, and that will center everything. Cool. And now this BMO name and the avatar are still appearing above each other when I want them side by side. And so that's because they're in this A tag together. The reason they're an A tag is because a lot of times when you go to a website, you expect to be able to click on the name of the website, like their title up here, and it's a link to go home. So if I were to have a header with different pages, you can always click on this to go home. And so it's an A tag with the href of slash, which takes you home. So I'm going to select this, which has the avatar and the text, it's A tag, and I'm going to make it a Flexbox also. So I'm going to say title, and it's an ID, display flex, and now those appear side by side. Now this BMO text here, I want it to be along the bottom. And I can do that with, let's see, align items, baseline. That would be, I think, similar to align items flex end. Yeah. And again, align items and justify content are like kind of your main things. Once you do a Flexbox, you need to adjust these to get the items spaced how you want them. And then you can also do a gap if you want. So let's see here, let's do a gap of 1 rem. That pushes those out side by side. And then I don't want this avatar pressing up against the side and the top there. And so I think this whole kind of header container could probably have a padding. And I'll just do 1 rem for now, see how that looks. I think it could be, I think it's fine for now. Maybe a little bit smaller, 0.75 rem. And then on the sides, it's a little bit too small. And so let's see, with padding, you can specify the padding for the sides or the top. I always forget. Let's try it. Okay, yep. So the first one will be the top and bottom. Second one will be the sides. Depends on how many you put here. So we're having a side-to-side padding of 2 rem, which is the root font size, which is 16 pixels times 2. So that would be 32 pixels on the side-to-side padding. And then 0.75 times 16 on the top and bottom. And I like to use this guy a lot to kind of check things, make sure everything's looking good. Also, another CSS tip. If you ever want to really see kind of the space that everything is taking up, you can apply a border solid, or wait, border 1 pixel solid red. And that shows you kind of it looks terrible, but it's a way of displaying the actual elements. It puts a border on every single element if you do it up here. So everything selector, put a border 1 pixel solid red on everything. And now you can see kind of where everything, the space it's all taking up. Just a good thing to know because it's not always obvious, like you might not have known, oh, the H1 here may or may not be taking up the full height, and it's not. You can see the nav here is actually taking up just the same height as all these A tags. Just good things to know. And so I'll comment that out, and then if I ever want, I can comment that back in, which is nice. Okay, so we got the BMO name and his image appearing side by side. I got the links up here. The links are also going to be a nav or a Flexbox, and I think they're in a nav. Yep, nav. So I'll do display flex. And for these, I want them to be, I just want to use a flex. They're already like being put side by side because they're inline elements as opposed to block elements. Um, really quick, maybe I'll do a kind of a demonstration of what an inline element is versus what a block element is. So you can see this heading right here, skills. It's taking up the full width. Whereas each of these words in here are taking up, or if I were to do like two tags next to each other, if I were to do like, I mean, we do have these A tags, but say I took some of these A tags, put them down here. So you can see I have these A tags and they're appearing side by side, a bunch of tags appearing side by side. Whereas this skills tag, if I were to make multiple of these, they're going to appear above each other. So why do these skills section not go side by side where the A tags do go side by side? The reason is because some elements have some elements take up the full width and some elements appear what's called inline. And so the difference is display, I can say H2. So by default, H2s are display block, which means they're going to take up the full width that they're allowed. Display block means, oh wait, let's take up full width of parent container. That's what display block does. And then display inline is the opposite. Display inline. And you're going to see how this changes if I do display inline. Oh, I'm not seeing a change. Why is that? Oh, because the LIs are, yeah, all the LIs are block elements too. So if I made LIs inline too, LI display inline, now they're all going to appear side by side. And there's also a UL. UL display inline. So inline means display things side by side. Their width is going to be just whatever the width of their inner content is. Whereas display block means take up the full width. And so by default, heading tags like H1, H2, H3, all those are going to take up the full width because they're display block by default. Whereas A tags appear side by side because they're inline elements. If you have a Flexbox on the parent container, then everything goes out the window. There's no such thing as display block anymore. Everything is inline by default in a Flexbox. So display inline, take up only the width of inner content. That's what display inline does. So not going to worry about that right now, but that's just something that's good to know. Display flex means any inner content, you're just going to put it side by side. Or if you do flex direction column, display it on top of each other. So for this nav, everything's already appearing side by side, even without that, you can see. But I want to make it a flex box just so I can do a gap. I'm just a big fan of Flexbox. It helps with a lot of things. One of them is doing a gap between items. And then I'll make the size, I'll make the font size bigger here. So I'll say like font size, let's do 1.3 rem. And then you can see they're appearing in the middle. I kind of want them to appear at the same level as, well, let's see. It is a little weird having this image be so big. It makes the header have to kind of be big. These links look like they could be a little bit further down. So one way to do that would be um, I could put a margin top on the nav. And I could say 1 rem, and that pushes it down. You can hover over it and see. Let's see. Nav. And the margin top is that orange space right there. So that's pushing these elements down a little bit. Do 2, pushes them down even further. That's fine, I guess. Um, okay. So another big thing that's just like an always CSS, always something I like to do is you can see when I make this page the full width, um, it it's really wide. And in reality, you'll usually never see websites in the real world that have this much width for like one kind of section, like one block of text. Generally, you don't want a line of text to span that distance because it makes it hard to read. Um, and so usually people will set a max width on their different elements. And so I could set a max width on the body. But because well, I'll show you what will happen. It'll actually limit the width of the header, which we don't want. So if I did a max width here, let's do 40 rem just to start. So you can see it actually squishes the header in, and I want the header to always be the full width. So instead of putting the max width on a body, I'm going to put it on the section. And now it limits everything that's in a section to that max width. Um, And then because I have this inner header container here, I'm going to apply this max width to that too. And now everything's limited to that width. And then I'm going to make this width, because it's appearing in multiple spots and it's important that it matches everywhere, I'm going to make that into a CSS variable. So I'm going to say max width, 40 rem. And then everywhere I have max width, I'm going to say var max width. Okay, so it doesn't really look any better. It's because the max width is too small, and also because things are no longer centered within that width. So let's set this to maybe like 80. Try that out. I bring this out. Yep, some point it stops getting wider, you can see. These sections aren't taking up the full width, but they're not centered in the screen anymore, and that's an issue. And so usually we can fix that by just saying margin auto. And to be totally honest, I don't fully explain how this all, or I don't fully understand how this always works. Yeah, so sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Margin auto, if it's on the sides of your element, usually it centers your element in the page if the width isn't full. So the width of this element is not taking up the full width of the page. And so these margins on the side are going to automatically accommodate. So we have the max width and then the margin auto, and then that means our elements reach their maximum width, and then the margin automatically accommodates for any extra space. And I'll do that on the header container too, margin auto. Okay. So that's a big one, is making sure you have a max width on everything. Let's see. I'm gonna say our sections could be a little bit more spread apart. Um, and maybe the font size a little bit bigger. Um, so let's go to our root and change our default font size. This one's not going to be a CSS variable. It could be, but I'm just going to say font size, and let's just do 18 pixels. See how that looks. So we don't have like a ton of text on this page, and so it might be nice to make the font a little bit bigger so it just takes up more of the page. Um, and let's make the H2s have a little more padding underneath them, or like a little margin. So I could do, um, I'll put it up here next to the H1 to keep it organized. H2, and I could say margin bottom, 1 rem. So that just pushes these elements, these H2s up from their content a little bit. Could be a little bit smaller. Let's try 0.5. Looks good. Um, and maybe we're not using uh, this color, this accent color that much. So maybe let's use it on the H2s. So I'm going to say, oh, I could just copy it from up here, H1. So color accent primary, the color of our H2s. That's giving it a little bit of flair, which is cool. And maybe let's make it secondary just to give it some difference. Um, okay. I could probably go on forever. We're at an hour and a half now, and I think I'll probably call it. I know the page is still looking very unfinished, but CSS takes a while, especially when you're explaining every thought you're doing. But hopefully you got some good ideas of uh kind of ideas of where to get started. I guess I'll do like a little summary of key takeaways here. Um, using this everything selector and setting the margin and padding of everything, and then the box size and border box. That's a cool way of just resetting everything, the margin and padding on everything, so you control it. There's nothing like surprising you. Why is there spacing between things that you didn't put there? This just gets rid of that. This border 1 pixel solid red is a way of kind of debugging your CSS, you could say. Basically just showing you where all the elements are. It puts a border on every single element, and you can see exactly where it is, how much content it takes up, all that stuff. If there's any elements that you expect to be there but are not appearing, you can do that, and then it might show them. Using CSS, so you can use your root element for different things, but it's kind of often used for CSS variables, which this is the syntax. You use the 2 slashes before it and then the name of it. And generally you'll do slashes in between the words. You can't do spaces, which you've learned that in coding in general. You generally can't do spaces, so we do dashes. And then you do the the like value of this variable. You could do colors, you can do fonts, you can do um, widths or sizes of things. You can do pretty much anything. Yeah, there's some different resets. I like to do links. I sometimes like to get rid of the underline, which is text decoration none. ULs, I like to get rid of the dots, which you'll see here, these dots. And you can get rid of those. List style type none. Here, you can see throughout I'm just using these variables. And that's nice because if I were to want to change this accent color to like orange, I could change them everywhere on my page at once, and it'll change everywhere. So that's why it's nice to use variables. Um, Adding a max width on things is great because then when someone goes to your website, they aren't straining to see everything if they're on a bigger screen. Um, um, did some Flexbox stuff. I'd say Flexbox is like one of the most helpful things to know in CSS for just like aligning everything how you want it to be. That's probably one of the most difficult things at first when you're learning CSS is just I have something on my website. I want it to be somewhere else. How do I get it to be there? How do I get it to be centered? How do I get it to be on the left or the right? I want these elements on top or side by side, or, Flexbox is super useful at helping you get elements to go where they want or where you want them to go. Um, okay, that's it. I'll end it there. Thank you all. Sorry, this session was a little bit unplanned and lackluster.